This video is a brief introduction to the GroupLayer object with the ArcGIS API for Python and WebMaps. So open up the GroupLayer object.py script from the GroupLayers folder. We are going to use the map object and the content property to access our map content object, which has a property called layers that returns a list of layer objects from our web map. Just make note, there is a difference between the WebMap JSON definition, where we get the layers as a dictionary, and using the map.content.layers property, which returns a list of objects. Our list will contain feature layer objects and our group layer object. Let's head over to the documentation for the group layer object. Here we have the documentation for our group layer. The group layer class provides the ability to organize several sublayers into one common layer. There is a note here. This class should not be created by a user, but rather accessed through the indexing using the layers property on a map instance. What that means there is that we access the map object and the content property to access the map content object, and from that map content object we can access the layers list from the layers property. The group layer class itself has a few properties and functions defined here in the documentation. We can access the form for a layer, the layer visibility. The group layer itself has a property called layers to list the layers in that group layer. We can move a group layer into another group layer or to the main map. We can access pop-ups for the layers. We can remove a layer from the group, and we can update the symbology using the renderer. We can reposition within the group. We can access and update the title, the name of the group layer in the web map. We can use ungroup to remove from the group layer and move it to the parent. If that parent is another group layer, it gets moved into that group layer, and if there's no other parent, it is the main map. And we can use the update layer method to update labeling, symbology, and other properties using the options parameter. Let's pay a visit to our web map in ArcGIS Online. Here we have the current state of our web map. We can see we have our NPWS group layer. So county boundaries here sits at index 0 in the layer list, and then our NPWS group layer is at index 1. Let's head over to PyScripter. We first access ArcGIS Online. We then use the content manager get method and supply in our web map item ID, which I will paste in now from my notepad. The get method returns an item object that will assign to a variable called webmap item. We then use that item object to create our map object, which is assigned to a variable called webmap. We use our map object and the content property to access the map content object, and from there we can use the layers property to access the layers list. And we just saw from our web map that our group layer sits at index 1. I'm going to add a print function here to print the web map content layers, just to show you once more the objects that reside in this layers property. We'll assign the group layer object returned from our line of code here to a variable called GL for group layer. We're then going to print that group layer object to screen, and we're also going to use the Python dir function and print the available properties and methods for the group layer object to screen. So let's run this script. So let's take a look at the output. We first printed the webmap.content.layers to screen, and this is the list we were returned. We can see that there are two feature layer objects in there that represent our county boundaries and our NIAH locations, and that we have one group layer object, which is our NPWS group layer. We can see our group layer sits at index 1. We grabbed that and we printed the object to screen, and it printed group layer. We then use the dir Python function and fed in our group layer object, and we can see the lists of methods and properties that were returned. You can see here we have our form, layer visibility, layers, move, pop-up, remove layer, render, reposition, title, ungroup and update layer that we saw in the documentation. But you can also get some good information from a few of these dunder methods, that's a double underscore method, and also some of these single underscore. In the next video, we are going to use the underscore layer property here to narrow down accessing a group layer when we are using a for loop to iterate over all layers in our layer list returned. I highly recommend that you print out some of these properties such as underscore definition and underscore layer and take a look at the information that is returned. In this video, we took a quick look at the group layer object that is new to the API as of version 2.4.0. We took a look at the documentation and we'll be going through some of those properties and methods throughout this section.